Well, welcome everybody. Welcome, Daniel. So I know that people will be joining in, but I don't think we can wait until a certain number of people come. So we are going to presume to have started this conversation as of now. So, Daniel, good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Ashok. Yeah.
And firstly, congratulations on publishing your second book. This is, and I say this with deep respect as someone who's been trying to write a book for such a long time. I just am in awe of people who have the discipline and the capacity to finish a book, even a manuscript, and you have published two books. So, at a very basic level, Daniel, how do you feel now that you have finished your second book? Purely at a feeling level.
Well, it's a feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment. I mean, there's no other way to spin it. I had the time and the energy in my life, everything kind of lined up, including COVID, to say, focus, focus, focus. And it gave me, I got a lot of encouragement from people. And as I say, everything aligned. And it was a deep feeling of accomplishment, especially when we held the Zoom launch on March 7th to see friends from every decade in my life and realize I had done something that may impact the world in some small way.
Wonderful. Again, congratulations. And what I would like to do is just get started with a brief statement about MetaCulture and particularly MetaCulture Studio. I realize that apart from the people who have very kindly given up their time to join us for this live streaming, hopefully there will be other people who will watch this on our MetaCulture YouTube channel. So again, thank you if you've joined us either for the live stream or if you're watching this 6 months later. Many of you probably know of MetaCulture as a conflict management center that I started in 2005 in Bangalore. Now, MetaCulture has had a very, very strange existence over the past 16 odd years. Having said that, when I look back at the early days, the first 5 to 7 years, while it was very frustrating doing this work in India, we had a lot of fun. And I'm happy to say that we did some very useful work. However, around 2009, 2010, I started feeling very uneasy about what was happening in the world in general. The first big blow was, of course, the 2008 subprime crisis and the global financial recession that came with it. And along with it, what I saw as the slow but very steady collapse or deterioration, rather, of our liberal democratic societies. In 2013, I decided that, you know what, it's not enough to keep doing mediation, consensus building, and all that good stuff when simultaneously the open and free societies that give us all who live in democratic societies the rights that we have, when those societies are breaking down. And this is why I started in 2013 the Public Intelligence Project. And we shifted our focus from conflict management to finding ways to strengthen free and open societies. But as you can see from the current state of the world, MetaCulture and I failed dismally, and I'm, in a way, happy to take complete responsibility for the kind of almost collapse of the liberal, free, and open democracies that are so important for us. Since 2017, I've been living in DC, and we've been trying to find creative ways to understand what has kind of happened to our civilization. To this end, we run our Demo Sapien courses, make videos, and create posters. You can find more about these courses and activities from our link on the chat. The MetaCulture Studio that you have now joined us in is an attempt to go back to the foundation that undergirds all social activities. And I would say this is the foundation of civilization itself. And I am going to suggest that it is the ordinary conversation, the conversation between friends, between family members, between neighbors. This is the basis for a civil society. Now, I don't know about you, but like a lot of people, I'm tired of arguments and opinions and angry people trying to beat up on each other, shame and humiliate people on social media, and sometimes even in person, at least before COVID. I have found so many friendships destroyed over the last few years, even pre COVID, because we seem to have given up on trusting or even caring about people, except in terms of very ideological or political opinions that we hold. Now, so in order to kind of move away from that and to stop talking, I would like to pass the mantle on to Daniel. And Daniel, other than your existence as a writer, what is it that people need to know about you as a person? Who are you?
Thank you for the opportunity to respond, Ashok. Uh, one of the chapters in this book that I just finished, Reflections on the Nature of Friendship, has to do with that question, really, which is, who are we at the core of our identity? And it still feels a bit strange to me to hear myself spoken about as an author. This is perhaps the most recent iteration of my own life and livelihood. It's only in the last three to 4 years that I could even say that I've authored anything at all, other than all the academic writing, which to me, as a recovering academic, and that's an identity piece, is something that I can lay claim to. I think of myself as someone who cares deeply about relationships, first and foremost, and writ large, that's on a global level, and caring for humanity. But that's a bit abstract. So for me, it has to do with who I am, is about the relationships that I can build, how I can sustain them, how I can deepen them. It's caring about people's livelihood. I do a lot of volunteer work now that I'm retired from full-time work, finally, after 35 years in the academy. And some of the things I do is I farm at a local organic CSA farm. I serve as an associate chef at our local soup kitchen, the Stone Soup Cafe.
That's lovely.
And, these are things that I do. As far as who I am, it becomes difficult to describe, but I'm someone who feels the life and world issues and problems deeply, and also wants to engage in ritual and celebration at all levels of my life and the lives of my friends and my family. So that's an operating kind of framework, I think.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I have one more question before you fire away questions at me.
Sure.
So after you finished the book on friendship, when you look back at everything you learned from this process or this experience, what, if anything, surprised you? What learning came kind of out of the blue that you weren't expecting?
Well, there's a word in my life, and I think my friends may or may not know this about me, but I think one of the major learnings that's ongoing in my life has to do with learning and relearning patience. that book writing, like anything in life, is about developing the discipline, the muscles, but most of all, the patience to put up with myself in my moments of weakness and challenge and stuckness. The shadow side of myself, which we all have. And then in working with my book production team, which numbered anywhere between 3 and several dozen, depending on the place I was in the work, that I have to hold patience and gentleness for other people's personal challenges as well. And keep coming back to that's really bedrock for developing friendships and maintaining them and to get the work done.
So I'm going to push you a little more here, Daniel. And I know you're an academic, but I want you to talk only from your personal experience, not in terms of what should happen or what things are like. I am going to ask you, what is it about your own capacity for patience in friendships that struck you? Is there a way in which you're having patience or not having patience affected vital friendships that you're part of? And again, no theory, because I know you're a man you're an academic, and I love that about you. But in order that everyone can understand what it means to have patience in a friendship, what does that mean?
Well, we all run on our own cycles and our own energy and, at our own rate and pace. And again, not being theoretical, but being real, I move quickly. I move fast. The only thing I do slowly is eat. And I was the slowest eater in my family, and I lost out on a lot of desserts for that reason. But everything else, I love people. I love relating with people, challenging them, loving them. This isn't just, over the top, superficial cliches and platitudes. This is me in reality. And I sometimes feel like I push too hard in bringing people together around me, around each other, and such. And I've had to learn to relax that, because ultimately that speed, that rate is, I would have to say, and I judge myself harshly here, it's selfish. And I have to learn to slow down to accommodate other people's paces and other people's lives, which honestly doesn't come naturally to me. And the same thing with the writing, Ashok. I wanted to get it all done quickly. And this seems to be the way I live. And I've had to counterbalance this to develop a sense of equanimity.
Right.
And by that, I mean some of the things I've learned to do in the last few years, and I do regularly, daily, is meditation. Because this slows things down. It makes me more aware of my own inner process. And it just helps me to breathe. I mean, not just literally, but figuratively.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope that gives you a sense of the struggle for me.
Right.
Friendship with others and with myself.
Daniel, it's interesting that you mentioned meditation. And I'm going to say something that really concerns me about people who talk about the importance of slowing down and mindfulness. And as you know, particularly in the modern, liberal, left-leaning world that many of us live in, Buddhism, meditation, mindfulness is commonplace. I don't know a single friend of mine who hasn't attempted or doesn't do this regularly, in the US particularly. I don't find many of them patient. You see, I struggle with the ways in which people talk about some of these wonderful things, and in their own lives, I don't find them being able to translate these disciplines or these very useful tools into creating space to grow a relationship. And so this is not a question, it's just my reflection on this. When I was growing up in India, and even into my 20s, and through college and after, people didn't talk about meditation, even though we were in India. We didn't talk about mindfulness. We didn't talk about changing ourselves, of getting better, leave alone self actualization. But that's become fairly commonplace today, that kind of conversation, particularly to say the coastal elite or the cosmopolitan world, seems to have kind of completely absorbed the importance of these things. And yet, when I look around the people I know and the friendships that they have and had over, in some cases, decades, I see these relationships withering. I see them weakening. And I also see that in many cases it's been replaced, that the friendships have been replaced with a kind of animosity. So I'm wondering if beyond all of these tools, beyond all of these wonderful things that self-help books and psychologists and others tell us, if you and me can explore here at the core, what does it take for you and me? I'm not talking of anyone else.
Sure. Yeah.
Just you and me, not everyone. We won't talk about friendships in general. You and I, what have we over 60 odd years learned about ourselves as friends? I can start with myself if you would like, but because you've written this book, now I would rather have you go first. But if you're not ready, I'm happy to jump in. But what have you learned about you personally? Not what should happen, what happens generally from a psychological perspective or anything else. What do you know about yourself as a friend now? What would you change if you could go back 20, 30 years?
Oh, it's hard to not be somewhat theoretical because I'm
And
reflecting.
I'm going to stop you if you become theoretical. I really want you to be personal.
Well, I think the thing is that as I've grown older, and I can actually begin to say as I've aged, which is an ongoing process in all of our lives, there has been a sublimation of my ego. And what I mean by that is I'm not as engaged now as I was as an academic, an upcoming academic, to live solely within the realm of doing culture. And what that means is I've allowed myself to be more and take time and rest and walk and do the kinds of things that in my earlier years, I didn't allow myself. And so there's a space between activities now that I could not have comprehended during my college days and my full-time work days as a professor and so on, that every moment had to be filled. My schedule had to be filled. And it had to be one dance after another, after another. And at a certain point, because of health and medical issues that we all face and that I faced on an expedited model because I overly challenged myself, the burnout syndrome, I really had to teach myself that slowing down was going to prolong my life. Mm-hmm. And in that space, I got to know myself better. I was no longer just a doer, just an accomplisher of achievements, to become an associate professor, a full professor, a chair, a dean, a vice provost, all the way up the scale. But I lost myself in that process. In fact, I didn't know myself.
Right. Specifically where friendships are concerned, specifically.
So here's the thing. I feel like in our work, in my work, it is very production focused with endpoints, no matter how you look at it. The development of a syllabus, a course, the completion of teaching, hiring process, whatever it is. And friendship is not like that. Friendship is ongoing. There is no end point to a friendship except if it ends. But while you're in friendship, it's all about process. It's all about being with someone as fully as possible and being in that moment with them where nothing else exists. And where other things begin to creep in, I feel I'm distracted or they're distracted, and we're losing some of the intensity and the presence of the friendship. And so the more I can let go of past, present, future, except as it involves the friend or the friendship, the more I am available and accessible to being a friend. Uh, and it's a process of both letting go on the one hand and building up on the other. And it's a constant, for me, I can speak for myself, it's a constant negotiation between the doing and the being. And as I age, I err more and choose more to be rather than to do.
Mm.
And that's why writing a book, which is about doing, it becomes more difficult because I have to get it done. I feel a compulsion, and yet I'm learning, slow it down. It takes time. It's okay to do the same paragraph 15 or 20 times.
Daniel, I want to have you not tell us about the book anymore. I really want us to focus on our friendships. And, hearing you say, and I appreciate the connection between the patience needed for the book and patience needed for relationships. But I want to only focus on friendships right now. But hearing you talk about this really made me think about two things. The first, since I've been asking you to talk about yourself, let me share a little about my own experiences with my friendships. I think I see a kind of a trajectory. In high school and college, it was about having fun. People I could have fun with, and people with whom I kind of shared a common language. By that, I mean, we kind of got each other because we came from relatively similar backgrounds. Okay? And I think this was primary until my 20s and 30s when I started also searching for deeper intellectual and creative connections. Meaning, I was looking for something more substantive than just having company, warm company. And I think I went through quite a few years where my primary interest was being able to really discuss or enjoy common intellectual or creative or political or philosophic exploration. Now, when I look back at all those years, I realize that, and this is where what you said really strikes home to me, it was self-centered. I say self-centered because, and I was struck by something you said. You said you were trying to create community of friends around yourself or amongst bring people together
Yeah.
around you. And I think most of the work I did, or rather not even work, most of my friendships were really about me. They were really about me. And I think it took me into my 40s to kind of shift from that. And unfortunately, I don't have a happy ending here because pretty much like MetaCulture and the morphing of my organization, which is kind of probably the equivalent of your book writing, when I realized that we were heading towards a political crisis, what I call the perfect storm, around 2013, 2014, the growth in my friendships stopped. And this was not clear to me until a couple of years ago. And for about the last 10 years, I have alienated so many dear people because of my complete preoccupation with the state of the world. And I think I have pushed not just my peers and my colleagues and my clients, but also my friends to to, in my terms, step up to the plate, or in India, we would say step up to the wicket and play a role in preventing what for me is the collapse of our liberal civilization. This has been really, this has devastated my my friendship landscape or ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and this is nothing other than being self-centered. I was, even though I thought I was doing it for a better reason, for a higher cause, the fact is, Daniel, that it was purely around my vision of what was needed for the world. And I pushed my friends so badly that many of them stopped enjoying my friendship. So I wish, I mean, when I hear you say you've evolved and you've reached a point where things are in a better place for you vis-a-vis friendship, I have all that understanding that you do. I thought I had arrived there in my 40s, but I seem to have completely regressed because of this crisis situation we are in. So I'm just conscious.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many friends of mine or former friends of mine will ever watch this video. But in a way, I just want to say sorry because I have been singularly preoccupied and it has come at the cost of friendships.
Well, two things on that occur to me, Ashok. One is that a key in developing and sustaining friendship is self-awareness, which is what you're demonstrating as we talk. And it has come to you later than perhaps would have been ideal, but you have an awareness in what you just shared that may bring some friends back to you. We don't know. There's no outcome, but that awareness, almost as in a form of apology, is, in a way, it's a key to friendship. It's a key to life. It's because it brings you out of that self-centered, narcissistic, my way or the highway, which one could say you were so driven by such passion that you were single-minded. And to be able to pull things back and say, you know, that didn't work. I'm now realizing things about myself and my friendships that I, if I could do over again, I would. And also the fact that you have become, in some ways, both more curious and less curious. And curiosity has everything to do with a friendship, because when you're curious about something, it's about someone or something else outside of you, beyond your skin. And it's what gets you to ask questions. It's what gets you to really think about relationships, whether it's in the natural world or the people world or whatever. And I think that's what we're hungering for. I think getting outside of our isolation and our insularity has to do with asking questions. And for me, it was always a deal breaker in my friendships if it was all about the other person and they couldn't break out of themselves. Because what was I doing other than just observing and witnessing? I wasn't engaging, nor were they. And at a certain point, I realized, you know, there has to be an exchange. There has to be a give and take, and I have to accommodate to it. I have to get off my own track.
Right. So, Daniel, that makes perfect sense. And I think, kind of hearing both of us talk about this, I'm conscious of two things. One, we've talked about this, the breakdown in friendships and breakdown in relationships. And when I say friendships, this also includes family. I'm talking, of anyone with whom you have a certain sense of conviviality, a certain, you are able to be hospitable with each other. And hospitality is, I think, a very important part, making generous space with each other. I think it's a very important part of friendship.
Well
But
put.
I'm struck by something we haven't explored, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. You see, friendships break down for a range of reasons, and we know that sometimes they break down because people grow apart. And today, particularly in our highly mobile, globalized world, people, study in 5 different schools, work in 10 different cities, and change companies or careers a few times. and it's difficult to keep in touch with people. So that's almost like a natural but tragic way in which we lose friends. But the other is when friends behave in ways that we don't expect them to, and when it feels like we are not being served by our friendships. And my example was a good one when I pushed people too
Yeah.
much out of my passion. So this creates, and I want to put this word out there, but I don't want to go about this part of the conversation in the typical way in which people talk about hurt or trauma. In other words, I don't want this to be Oprah Winfrey kind of a conversation at all. That's too much. There's too much of that in our zeitgeist, and I am slightly skeptical about it. But it does raise the question of hurt. When a friend does something that hurts the other person, as a psychologist and someone who's really done some deep work on friendships, what do you think happens in the context of that friendly relationship? And I'm not talking about just at a psychological level, what's happening in the mind of a person. I'm talking of in the context of these two or three people who are in a deep bond. What happens when there is hurt and even a sense of maybe betrayal?
Well, I mean, there's pain and there's suffering. I mean, emotionally, in one's inner landscape, when one feels abandoned or ignored, betrayed, all those things. Um, there's sometimes it gets down to the bedrock of trust.
Mm,
I trust you if you've let me down, or you've walked away, or you've insulted me, knowingly or unknowingly. And then the question is, am I curious enough to find out what's going on inside you, as opposed to running away? And here we come to one of the most challenging pieces, and a question I have for you, which is, how do we deal with conflict in our friendships? And I know with your many years of work with MetaCulture, and even before that, in your work in Boston and so on, you've been working with conflict. And I wonder, for you, if you could talk about your experience in dealing with conflict, interactive conflict in friendships, not the kind where they've moved away or left the area or had a family and are
right.
putting time into it, but where there's a clash. And what happens there? Because the measure of any friendship or any relationship is not when things are going well. It's how do you negotiate the schisms between people when you want to maintain the friendship and something is in the way that can't be ignored. So what can you say to that?
Okay, now we're getting into very treacherous territory, Daniel, because as someone who, particularly in the last 25 years, has worked in the field of mediation, conflict resolution, consensus building, and the like, where everything you're talking about is really at the core of the work we do, that conflict is inevitable.
Yeah.
We are going to mess up. You put two people who love each other in a room, and within hours, if not days, or within days, if not hours, they will be at each other's throats. And that's normal. And it's almost a truism in the field of non-adversarial dispute resolution or conflict resolution that with the right tools and the right skills, we can kind of bridge the chasm that happens. We can actually take a step back and ask ourselves fundamental questions that help us reconnect despite the conflict. One can also say, in fact, we say this all the time, that without conflict, no relationship grows. That you need friction. And this is something that I've been saying for such a long time. And I want to say something that's been terribly disheartening for me, Daniel, particularly in the last 5 to 7 years. when I have had conflicts with, or I wouldn't even call them conflicts, when there has been minor tension and a bit of a break or distancing between me and many of my conflict resolution peers,
Mhm.
mediators, wonderful facilitators, and people who I would in a heartbeat hire as a consultant for a really difficult project, I have found that very few of them have the capacity to stay in that place of stress or tension or conflict in order to work through it. It's been devastating for me. I can't even tell you. It's one thing, and I give this example very often. India in general, we are conflict avoidant people. By that I mean, if there's a conflict, we either run away or we fight. We do not say, "Hey, I sense a tension. Why don't we talk about it?" And for years, I thought the West, particularly the Anglo-Saxon West, had a tremendous advantage over, or even the German and Austrian West, had a tremendous advantage over the East because of Freud and because of analysis and therapy. And you folks had 100-year head start in talking and processing these things. And I didn't see that in India, where going to a counselor or a therapist is still very much a taboo. And I realized during this period, my last 5 to 7 years, I would almost say my conflict phase as it in my life, I found that it's one thing for people to know how to do this theoretically and to put on a hat as a mediator and go forth and practice it when your feelings and opinions and ideologies and your safety is not at risk. And it's a completely different thing to say, uh-oh, I'm in a bit of a difficult situation with a close friend or a colleague. Why don't I practice the very things I'm talking about? Now, I say this because, this is what I wanted to share, but I kind of rambled a little. I give the example of my mom, who she passed away almost exactly 3 years ago. And obviously, like with most people who pass away from your lives, the longer they go, the more you realize how vital they were in your existence. And we
Mm.
weren't terribly close, but we kept in touch all the time. And I've never lived at home for the last 50 years. But it was mostly through the phone. And every time we had a argument, I don't even want to call it a conflict, on the phone, she would put the phone down.
Mm.
She wouldn't continue with that conversation. And me being the kind of person, I needed resolution right now. So I would keep calling her back and she wouldn't pick up the phone. And she wouldn't pick up the phone for the next 3 to 4 days. After a week, she would call and it would be as though we never had that tension. She wouldn't want to talk about it, but she would treat me with as much love, affection, caring, and concern as she did before this mini dispute. And I saw this as a wonderful thing in a way in the East, that there was a capacity for people who loved each other to forgive without necessarily understanding. My mom would never try to understand what happened and why I felt this. But her capacity for forgiving her son was unconditional. She just needed time to do it.
Right, right.
But uh, here's the thing, with all the Western capacity for processing, and Oprah Winfrey and all these talk shows and everything else, it's such a part of our mainstream culture here. I find when push comes to shove, even with professionals, there is very little appetite for taking a step back and saying, hey, I'm surprised we are struggling here, Ashok or Daniel? What's happening? Because, we used to get along and something's changed. Why don't we talk about it? I don't see that happening amongst the professionals who, more than anyone else, are devoted, they are passionate, they are good at it. I don't want to call it hypocritic at all. It's not hypocrisy. There's something else happening.
This is a big deal. And I think what lies at the base of this is most human beings do not have a capacity or the volition to be vulnerable.
Mm.
And when you enter into conflict or deep disagreement, you're vulnerable because you don't know if it's a zero-sum game or not. You don't know what will come out of it. And yet, the more you enter yourself in, this is a core belief of mine, because I don't believe that I am conflict averse, but I think most people are, and they lack the confidence to know what to do. There's nothing in our education or our training or our family upbringing that really teaches us how to go about this, how to enter in, both in terms of a mindset, a set of behaviors, a set of questions, all the tools that we're skilled to do professionally or in your field. And we can do them insofar as there's a power asymmetry. And so I come out of the academy, and there's nothing, maybe politics, but I don't think there's any other field that where there's more power asymmetry than academia. And we're safe if we are in a position of power and control. But when we lose that, which we lose with our friends because it's a co-equal relationship, there's more at stake. And that's really where it takes knowing oneself, having confidence in oneself, and a sense of curiosity to get out of the mindset of, I've got to win this no matter what. And when you're teaching, when you're professing, when you're consulting, training, all those things, there is a power asymmetry. It's very dynamic. Things are predicated on the fact that I'm in charge, watch me, I'm going to lead us through this process. But when no one's leading, as in friendship, there's much more at stake.
So this is fascinating and very useful, Daniel. Let me ask you. So are you saying that power asymmetry is better for resolving conflicts than a co-equal relationship, because nobody has any control at all? I mean, this is actually devastating. And if I might add one more thing, because there is such a huge assumption that democratic societies make, that equality is fundamental for respect and for sustainability of societies. People talk about the fact that equal relationships, non-hierarchical organizations, and democratic societies are far more sustainable. But what I'm hearing you say is that conflict is easier resolved in an unequal situation than in an equal situation. What's this about?
Yeah, let's back up on that, because I'm actually trying to say the opposite. And I guess I haven't argued passionately enough here. Power asymmetry allows the person who's in the dominant role to step away at any point.
Okay.
We can call it white privilege. We can go in any direction we want with that. But it means if I'm in charge, I make the rules. And as long as one person is making the rules in a relationship, I don't believe you can really resolve a conflict. I think you can quash it. I think you can run around it. You can do an end around, but there's power over. And I don't think that that's the way to deepen a friendship. I think both partners have to be willing to be vulnerable. And that takes away the power asymmetry. I know when I'm in the classroom or consulting or whatever, if I don't talk about myself, if I don't model who I am as a human being, not just the power in charge, then I'm not really freeing other people up to do the same. It's not fair to them.
Daniel, I don't think I will buy that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. That's precisely the issue that I am struggling with. The work that I've been doing all this while has been premised on exactly what you're talking about, that when you have an equal situation, there is no suppressing of the conflict, and that both people have a stake in the relationship and they can move forward to try to work through things.
If
I
they
am, yeah, right. And I'm suggesting that's not the way the world is actually working. So, and this is a new realization, which is only in the past 5 years for me. When I look at, let's take two scenarios. One is friendships. The other one is um, an organizational relationship, or even a geopolitical situation. Okay, so when you have an autocratic society, China is a great example. In a country like Singapore or China, they don't even make an effort to be equal or to aspire for equality. They are focused on trying to create stable and prosperous societies. Okay, and there's no question about who's on top.
Yep.
Okay, now in that situation, conflicts, there are two ways in which conflicts can happen. One is, as you say, conflicts are suppressed, and we all know that that's unhealthy. But I see something else happening, that they have not so much those societies as, and I'm going to talk about bringing a professional into the situation. When you bring a conflict resolution professional, a facilitator, they come with expertise and they have the role of being the mediator. In other words, they have control over the process. They are not equal to the parties. Now, in that situation, they have unequal power, but that unequal power helps them get helps them get the parties moving towards resolution. Whereas in a friendship situation, because there is no inequality in most friendships. One can talk about the fact that people have different strengths and financial capacities and all that, but in general, the assumption is they're flat.
Right.
Now, in that situation, in my experience today, people do not even want to go through a process for which, even if you want to bring a process, and I'm just working this out as I'm talking with you, even if we want to bring a process into play, and the process could be as simple as, hey, this is unfortunate, I'm sorry we got angry with each other, can we sit down and talk? Now, that's a process. Okay?
Yeah.
People don't want to do that, because there is nobody to say, you know what, I'm sorry, guys, sit down. I don't want you to hug each other or anything, but I do want you to talk about it. That requires a certain kind of someone who has some control, whether it's about process or something else. So allow me to just finish this, because as I said, I'm rambling, but I'm trying to get to something very important. All my professional life as a conflict management person, I have advocated and advised clients to create equal situations, democratic situations, telling them that they can resolve conflicts better. But in my experience, equal situations, whether one-on-one personally or even in the world at large, creates conflict, doesn't necessarily allow for the resolution of conflicts, because someone at one point, either one of the parties or a third party needs to have the control to step in and say, I'm sorry, guys, we need to talk about this. And this is the way we need to talk. And in friendships that presume to be completely equal, people say, why the hell should I listen to you? Why the hell should we even talk about this? Because you've upset me. And I don't want to talk about this. Thoughts, Daniel?
Lots of thoughts, Ashok, lots of thoughts. We've been reflecting a lot on the nature of professional relationships, which in your field and my fields, there is a built-in power asymmetry which never goes away. It's baked into everything that happens. With friends, if they come to friendship by choice, and I do think about friendships being of our own volition, no one is imposing that you have to be friends with anyone. But if we choose to be friends and we're committed to that friendship, then it is a question to me of stepping into it and engaging. And sometimes you need to take a time out. I'm not saying, wait, I need some time here to think before I can respond. That to me is a healthy response. But to shut it down and to walk away is an act of power asymmetry just by itself. And so that, and it's part of the reason I've never liked the terminology of conflict resolution.
Right.
I've never been in agreement with that, because there's a built-in assumption that every conflict can be or should be resolved. So if we dispense with that, I believe much more in conflict response or conflict transformation, because being in conflict, engaging in conflict, first of all, that is responsive and responsible. And second, it can transform the friendship.
Right.
Now, this is a field you know more about, but it's one I believe in.
Right.
But in friendship, where it's co-equal, if you only step away and don't resolve, then how do you go forward? Because there are gaps all across that friendship based on fear and lack of trust.
Daniel, this is, I think, the difference between you and me in this conversation. You are talking of what should happen. I'm talking of what happens. I'm not talking of an ideal. I'm not talking of what should happen in a friendship. I am concerned with what's happened to human friendships. And I agree with you. Just the way you put it, it's beautiful. I've been advocating that for years. And I find that perhaps human beings haven't reached that level of evolution in order to take that time and space to be committed enough, as you say, because, and here's I'm really struggling with this it's almost an existential crisis for me, because I can't think of this as a professional anymore. When I see the complete devastation of relationships, firstly, the families have broken down globally, not just in the West. Okay, first the extended family breaks down, and then you have nuclear families. Then nuclear families break down, and then you have single parent families, and then you don't have neighborhoods anymore because we move all the time. We don't invest in neighborhoods, and then friendships have become transactional, or they have become transient. I'm friends with some people because I go to work with them, or I hang out with them in the bar or wherever else, but then I move town and they no longer exist in my life. And here's the thing, that what you're talking about that commitment to friendship, Daniel, I think it's become so rare that conflict, all the wonderful things I learned about conflict and mediation, and whether it's transformation or management or whatever, has gone out of the window. They have become almost esoteric, highly luxurious tools and processes that we use under controlled temperature and pressure. So for me, this conversation with you, I never wanted it to become professional. I'm really concerned about the state of human relationships globally. And this brings me to something else. Remember, I gave the example of my mother. I think traditional societies have the capacity to forgive and move on with the relationship. I think our transient, transactional, temporary relationships today, I think these have created a situation where we don't forgive, don't forget, but just cut off. And I can see it happening not just in the West now, I can see it in the East also. So let me bring you to another question. How have your friendships changed with social media? I want to give it another couple of minutes before we ask folks for their questions. So because I know you as I was going to say in your face, you're not in your face at all, but face to face, you're the kind of person who loves cooking together, doing things together. I've had so many wonderful afternoons and evenings with you and our common friends.
Yeah.
But in the world of social media, how has this affected you and your friendships, Daniel?
It's been difficult. And I think even in the past year, during this time of COVID and isolation and insularity and so on, I have felt what I term a loneliness, the sense of being alone and also being lonely. And yet I live with, I'm recently married. And so I live in a relationship with someone where we're in constant connection and working through issues on a daily, if not hour by hour basis. But I have missed people, and Zoom doesn't do it for me. Zoom doesn't do it. I think I don't know if it's become common parlance at this point, but I think we're all focusing or functioning with Zoom fatigue. But I have found creative ways to be with people, even with the distancing and the masks and such, that have allowed me to continue to engage. And I also believe in the old-fashioned form of communication called letter writing.
Ah,
And, these are, I won't say they're substitutes, they're valid. They're valid. And for me, I have just had to dig more deeply into committing to saying, we may not be able to see each other or hold hands or, any of the kumbaya stuff that I'm used to, but let's find ways to stay in touch. That has to happen. And yet a lot of the friendships that I've had, which are long-term, even you say with you, more than 20 or 30 years, you can give slack. If we move away from only focusing on conflict, the best friendships are like rubber bands. And I do want to bring that up because I've written about that, but I believe that there's a stretch factor in relationships that gets built up over time. And there's more flexibility, there's more openness. The rubber band serves as a container that can move in different directions and shift, shape shift, and so on. That gives friendship an enormous amount of opportunity to operate within, without breaking, without stretching beyond repair. And to me, this is what the past year plus since COVID has been. But for many people, it's been ongoing beyond that. And that's why I don't give up, because I am talking about an ideal of how people can be friends.
right.
But I'm also living the fact that I have those friendships and they're
Right.
precious beyond anything else.
Right.
And it literally takes social work. It takes social work. And not all conflicts, not all friendships can only exist in the realm of conflict.
Right.
Then one has to wonder what's there that we're choosing. But I think outside of the conflict, you can build off the conflict and the process of being in it or going through it to establishing deeper trust, deeper empathy, deeper compassion. And these aren't theoreticals. These are things that I believe and I live in.
Right.
Yeah. So
Thank
I'll leave
you.
it at that.
Thank you. And again, for me, I think I am so devastated by the state of the world that I have to confess, I don't have very much of confidence in the human capacity for maintaining humane relationships anymore. And I'll tell you why. I think the world is becoming increasingly more fragmented. Uh, I think the internet and the smartphone have been the two most devastating technologies for not just relationships, but for thinking itself. Too much information, lack of thinking. Thank you, Daniel, and I need to take a deep breath because I think we've reached a point where each one of us is suffering from what you are talking about. You mentioned, Daniel, loneliness. I think friendship is the antidote for loneliness. And what has happened is we are all today not just fragmented, we are isolated. And we are alone in a really traumatizing way. And it's heartbreaking for me when I see this happening, not just amongst friends, but amongst families, the complete breakdown or the to use your wonderful rubber band analogy, that flexibility, I think, has been replaced by one of two things: either the rubber band breaking, or the tension being, the rubber band losing its elasticity. It's become so loose that there's no rubber band anymore. And again, there's enough social research to talk about, starting from Bowling Alone, the classic book from 2000, which talked about how Americans don't have community anymore. We don't have friendships anymore, and we don't really we don't really have that kind of a connection anymore. And then you have the internet, and everybody talks of online communities. And for me, there is no term as sad as an online community. As you know, I run courses, and people are very excited sometimes to say, oh, after 2 to 3 sessions, oh, I'm so glad we have this community. We can talk about things. And I say, no, do not kid yourself. I am not creating an online community. I'm merely creating a group that comes together once a week, and we are together for 12 weeks. Some of you may come from multiple courses, but I don't kid myself. I'm creating a community. That word is precious. It's sacred. And we shouldn't use the words like friendship and community, or even family, or I would say even society, in a loose way, the way in which we use it now. So anyway, there are a couple of questions that are coming, and I want to take one of them, and then there's one for you, Daniel, that I will send your way. But the first question that Pilar is asking me is, she says, Ashok, when you say pushing your friends, you mean this leads to arguments and that brought you apart. I wonder what you think about preserving friendships in that context. So it's the problem, and I'm not going to give theory. I'm not interested in talking about how we should preserve friendships. Let me talk about what the challenges are, because I think we are at that stage in human in deconstructing what it means to be human or a society, that we cannot get away with theories or even ideals. We have to ask ourselves, what is really happening? And what must we do in order to allow our wonderful theories to work again, to move society towards a more ideal state? We can't start with the ideal. We have to recognize society for what it is. So here's my response, Pilar. The difference between getting your health back through dieting and exercise and repairing a friendship is, if as long as you're committed to your health and your exercise and your diet, you can do something about it. But when it comes to a relationship, it's not just you, it's you and someone else. I mean, we talk in countries like India, or in Asia and Africa, we talk about the fact that there are no one-on-one relationships. All relationships exist in a community. You're not married to your spouse alone. You are married to your in-laws. You're married to the village. It's not an individual project to repair a relationship. It's a community project. Now, when I talk about my own relationships and friendships, which have been battered because of either my moving from city to city, my changing careers, but most recently because of my passion towards somehow mobilizing my peer group, my friends, my clients, to try to step up and do something before society collapses. I have broken relationships. I have strained relationships. And it's not that I haven't tried to keep them going, Pilar. It was never my intention to weaken the relationship. I really wanted to keep the relationship going with this as another layer on the relationship. And here's what I realized: those relationships or those friendships did not, were not equipped to take on another layer. They existed purely at that level of comfort and trust and security. The moment another layer came in, it, all of us in the relationship didn't have what it took to step back and say, hey, I see a new layer. Why is that happening? How can we allow that layer or that idea or that push to destroy the friendship? Why cannot we work through it? That requires all the parties to do so. I'll give you an example of my trying with my colleagues in the conflict resolution field, because I have presumed that they have these tools. They understand these things, as Daniel has put it so eloquently. I have gone back to them and asked them to talk with me. I have said, let's talk. Let's not create this distance. When can we talk on phone? If I'm coming to your city, let's meet up over coffee or lunch. Come over home and I'll cook for you before COVID. There were no takers. There were no takers. So for me, preserving relationships requires what Daniel said, being able to stay in at that level of vulnerability. To not just, it's such a, again, such a fashionable word. Everyone uses it, including 18-year-olds today. But to remain vulnerable, particularly with a friend, it's very difficult. Very difficult. Now, not unless you have a therapeutic relationship with a friend. And I know Daniel has, what's that process you use?
Co-counseling.
Co-counseling. And he has great friendships where they have structured into their friendships co-counseling processes and time for it. Most people don't have that.
That's right.
And I know where Daniel is coming from, because he does that with his friends. He has the optimism that it can be done. But I would say, how many people can you co-counsel with in terms of your larger friendship network? How many family members allow for that kind of co-counseling with them? So for me, I'm talking about the real world, not of ideal situations that you or me or Daniel can create. And preserving relationships today, for all those many reasons that I talked about, has become very, very different. Again, contrasting from my mother's example. And it's not just because it's a mother and son relationship. 20, 30 years ago, I have witnessed families really fighting with each other. But when there's a new marriage in the family or a death, people come together and they clear the cobwebs. Not all of them, but I've seen it happen. That kind of live and let live, that kind of bond and trust and the need for interdependence is missing. Each one of us believes we are self-contained at best with our spouse or our kids or our job or our career. That's the only thing that we need anymore. So I'm going to stop, but this is my response to it. Pilar, I don't know if it answers. Daniel, there's a question for you. And Raju asks, Daniel, sounds like you have slowed down to do self-care and noticing while the ego got nice and small. Did that make you a better friend and more accessible to others? Your ego getting small and you're noticing what's happening. Did that make you a better friend?
Well, you'd have to ask my friends, Raghu. Raghu, I don't know honestly, objectively. I know for myself that I've really taken a deeper level of curiosity and care as I've been able to slow down, because I'm not racing, I'm not rushing, I'm not just zooming ahead with the next project and so on. And there's a question that I ask myself and that I ask my friends, and it opens a door. And this is not focused on conflict. It's the most profound question to me in the world. Is there more? Is there more? Because that allows us to get beneath the surface, and search for deeper meaning in our daily lives. And you have to have enough patience to even know that that question exists.
Mm.
And then you have to be more present to hear and take in the response. You
I,
can't, the question that we ask each other all the time, I don't know how universal this is. How are you? It's a non-question. It's a non-starter. If you get anything more than a grunt or a groan or okay, or I'm fine, or good, how are you? That's the extent of it. That's the wrong question. But if you're going to ask a deeper question, it takes time. It takes the patience I was talking about earlier. And if you're being authentic and genuine, you have to be there for the answer or the response. And so I have found for myself, and again, I put myself up to the judgment of my friends here, that I feel like in slowing down, I'm making more space. And in making more space, there's more time, and there's more curiosity, and there's more energy in the present. Does that make me a better friend? I hope so. That's what I stake my friendships on, making time. And it doesn't have to be in person, face to face. It can be a phone call. It can be, if it has to be, Zoom, but it has to be present.
Thank
So
you.
I hope that's helpful. I will say that it's an ongoing challenge. I have to kind of wake up every day and review my day and where I am with my connections, my contact. And I'm not just a social being. I do write and I do work as other folks do. But in those relational moments, I have to make sure that it's beyond mere transaction.
Right. Thank you. I loved a question that you asked a while ago here. Is there more? I love that question. I love that. In fact, I'm going to steal it. It is such a good question because you don't know if there's anything more unless you are one patient and you wait, but also unless you're curious. If you think that if someone shouts at me and I think that that's all there is to that person,
Right.
she is a horrible person, she is an angry person, or he is selfish, I stop being open to that person. And I love the fact that this question, is there more to that person? Is there more to that relationship? Is there more to that friendship? Can be a huge opening question. I love it. Thank you.
It's a contradiction against time.
Right, right.
And it's an opening. And yes, you don't know.
You
Friendship
don't
is
know.
not scripted. You don't know what you're going to get back. And that is why you have to be prepared and open for anything.
Right,
Don't ask the question if you can't be there for the response.
right,
It's not worth it.
right.
That's why I don't even ask in passing, how you doing?
Right.
It gets no one anywhere. It's a waste of a platitude. And I'd rather be sincere and really sit down with someone in whatever context and say, tell me more. Is
Right.
there, and be prepared for whatever comes.
I love it. I love it. Now, there's another question from Nilam. Nilam asks, given that there may not be a universal definition of friendship, are enduring friendships dependent upon personalities involved in this dynamic? Daniel, a minute for you to go first, and then I will take it.
Okay, run the question again, just so I can focus.
Given that there may not be universal definitions of friendship, are enduring friendships dependent upon personalities involved?
Well, that's the classic response I would offer is yes and no. I mean, and that's not meaning to back away from it, but we are our personalities in terms of what we manifest in the world every day. And there's a word within personalities called persona. And that is what we show to people. And so based on what we show to other people, that is what they respond and react to. So there's a dynamic, there's a dialogic back and forth. My first book was, and again, I don't want to relate the professional, but the subtitle is The Search for Deeper Meaning in Daily Life. So if we get beyond just the superficial, then we're able to really go deeper. But we start from that place of personality. And we're all impacted all through our lives on the way we were raised, our schooling, our families, and so on. Those are the shapers of our personalities. And how we relate to others is based on the hurts, the resolution to those hurts, or lack of resolution, the triggers that we carry. These are all human. They're unconditional. I mean, they're without condition that we all have them. And it's friendships, I think, that help us to heal those trigger points and those hurts. We're born into that hurt. That's the human condition. And so it is based on personality, and it also transcends personality.
Thank you.
So there's my minute and 12 seconds.
Are you keeping time? That's better than me.
No, I'm not. I was guessing.
So, again, I have to take a slightly different tack.
Oh, you're good. Let's hear it.
I think it's completely dependent. There's no yes and no. It's yes, yes, and yes. It's all based on the people involved and their personalities. And I don't think there is a quintessential friendship. I think all friendships are created because of the kind of people who come together. And this becomes self-evident in times of crisis. And I'll give you an example. If you have a group of 5 people or 6 people who went to school and college and they get along very well with each other, it can almost feel as though their personalities don't come in because the band, that group, is so strong. But the moment, either because of distance or because of changing life circumstances or because of conflict, the tensions arise or the group becomes less cohesive. We start immediately recognizing that A is able to cope with this, B is devastated by the change, C has the patience to deal with this, D suddenly realizes that she is better off somewhere else. And each person there, the personality, the character, I would use the word character more than personality, starts impinging on the quality of the relationship. So this raises another issue for me. If my hypothesis is reasonably accurate, that we are only good in a relationship as our character/personality, then we have to ask ourselves if the 21st century is helping us develop a better, more robust character, a better quote unquote personality, or is it weakening the kind of character and personality of ordinary people? And this is where I really want us to pay attention to the devastation that's happening to our world. It's not just about Modi coming to power in India or Orban reversing the gains of Eastern Europe or Central Europe after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, or Trump. It is not just about those. It is about what a hyper accelerated urbanization, globalization, and the technologies that have immensely accelerated the pace of life. It's what that has done to who we are as people. And by that, I mean as individuals. How can I talk of my character and my personality when I've even lost the capacity to pay attention for more than 5 minutes on one screen because I get distracted by my WhatsApp ping. I get distracted by, another screen that's something exciting is happening there. How is it even possible for me to develop character? Unless the word character itself has lost its meaning. The word character, for the longest period, meant the development of values and strength and personal integrity. But if I have no time for anything, and if I have no sense of attention or focus, and if I've become so individualistic that I don't care about anything but me and my stimulation, where is this character? So I would like to end on this note that yes, friendships are only as good as the people involved. But am I even me anymore? And what does it say for a society or a civilization if we are but hollow men and women? I don't know if I am Ashok anymore in a robust way. I have to every day, 3 times, 10 times a day, remind myself that if I'm not acutely conscious of retaining my humanity at a deep level, I could wither away, because that's what the world is doing. When we talk, because of my work in peace building and conflict resolution, when we talk about genocide, it's really nothing but the loss of the self. Violence can be seen as the loss of identity, and violence is one way to desperately clutch at any sense of self, even if it is at the cost of others. Now, obviously, in friendships, broken friendships are not necessarily violent, and they are, well, they might seem like a far cry from political genocide. But if you really look at what undergirds all of this, it's that we humans can connect with each other only if we pay enormous attention, and this is what Daniel has been saying, enormous attention to what's happening with the 1 or 2 or 5 people we are involved with. And I don't think we have the capacity to do that anymore. Most of us probably sleepwalked through relationships when we were young. But today, in this complex world, we don't live in a village anymore. The stresses are so intense that unless we pay enormous attention, we run the risk of losing much of what we have. So I'm going to stop here, and I know that Sri and Rukmini will be giving us a quick sharing a few slides with me. And I'd like to remind you folks that about the work that MetaCulture does. So Rukmini, please go ahead and share the slide. And I'd like to, first, Daniel's book itself. I want to share with all of you Daniel's book. Please try and buy it. I'm waiting for the slide. Okay, Rukmini, thank you. Here's Daniel with a lovely plant behind him and his book, Reflections on the Nature of Friendship. Daniel Cantor Yalowitz, EDD. And the next slide, please. This is the book. The next one, you get the whole cover. And he has some great blurbs. A lot of people who have seen value in the book, people he's worked with over many, many years. Daniel, would you like to say something about your book?
Well, thank you, Ashok. This comes out of the hopefully brief era of COVID, which is the year that I wrote it, 2020. And it really provided me with the opportunity to dig deep at a time where I think, as you've talked about in great depth, Ashok, humankind is struggling and moving perilously close to the negatives that we all fear, in terms of violence and bifurcation and such. This is an attempt to address that directly, and to do so I put myself out there, as I've talked about. I make myself vulnerable by offering 3 case studies of friendships and assessing them and analyzing and digging deep. The question, is there more, is pertinent on virtually every page.
Daniel, how can we buy this book?
I'm sorry?
How can we get this book?
So the book is available, preferably if you'd like to have it inscribed and autographed, through my website, DanielYalowitz.com. It's also available as a soft cover and an ebook through Amazon. So those are the ways that you can get the book. And I'm eager to get the word out there. That's what I care about.
Thank you. And Shri and Rukmini, you will put this information out on the chat. Next slide, please. So our next course is the Democracy Culture course. We are going to run our 9th batch, and the information is on the chat. Shri will put it out there. Do get in touch with us. We'd love to be able to expand the number of people this course reaches out to. I can assure you that while it won't change your life, it will make you question things in a way that no other course has. Nobody who comes and says, oh, yeah, I know it all, because trust me, I'll make your life difficult. Daniel knows me. I provoke and I ask really tough questions, and I will listen to you. So, next course. This is the critical thinking course, something that's very dear to my mind, I won't say heart. And it's, again, the kind of course that you won't find anywhere else. And I think this is a course that is really necessary in this age of fake truth and fake news, and where everyone's lived experience is more important than evidence or logic or reason. Thank you, Shri. We started the Islam and Pluralism course a few weeks ago, and this is going to morph into a general course on pluralism. I call it for the confused secularists, because this is at the heart of one of the biggest problems in political societies today. Can religion coexist with secularism? And what does it mean to really to live in a pluralistic society? Can we really tolerate or respect or accommodate differences? Can we go beyond theories? Thank you, Shri. And finally, our relationship course. This is the course where we take a very different look, a very practical look at relationships. And I say for the independent thinker, because relationships require compromising on your independence. They require compromising on one's individual autonomy. There is no relationship without giving up something of some of you. The idea we can have everything is a dangerous fallacy. I used to call this course strings attached, and I will end with this anecdote. I read it somewhere many years ago. A grandmom and a granddaughter were sitting together and talking about the granddaughter's life. And at one point, the grandmother asked, well, Jane, what's with your love life? Any boyfriends? And the granddaughter says, you know, I'm done with relationships. And she's 19 at this time. I'm done with relationships because everyone seems to have strings attached to relationships. They want something, and I want to be free. And the grandmom looks at her and says, dearie, life is the strings. If we want to be completely free, autonomous, individualistic, and independent, you can't be in a friendship or a relationship. All relationships are about ties, not just beautiful connections you can let go at any point in time, but they are about ties, about strings which connect us, about bonds. Are we in a society today incapable of tying ourselves down anymore? I'd like to leave you folks with that thought. Daniel, thank you so much. It's been, as always, great talking with you. And I want you to have the last word. So, can you say one thing that you would like to leave us with? I think funny or poignant or profound.
Well, I'm not a storyteller, so I don't have that as an intelligence. But I will say, if you're willing to challenge yourself, if you're willing to take a step deeper into yourself and your life and your world, I think you'll find, as I have, that friendships are really a rooting and grounding force for good in the world, and certainly in each of our individual lives. And I hope you'll read my book. But more than that, just more than plugging my book, I hope you'll take the time to think about and work with the things that you need to become a better friend.
There's a question for you, Daniel. Is the book available in local bookstores?
Not yet. I'm looking to make that happen. And as soon as things open up more than they have, that's something I'll pursue. I'm also working on getting it into libraries and other places, but I think that's going to be more of a late spring, early summer project at this point.
Excellent. Well, Daniel, good luck with the book. I know we are the first people to interview you or have this conversation to, and I'm glad to be able to do what we can to launch your book. All the best. Take care of yourself, your health, and love to Margie.
Well, thank you, Ashok, and thanks to folks who listened in. And it's been a privilege to take the time to really think deeply with you this morning.
Excellent. Well, stay safe, everyone. Take care. I'm going to end the live stream now. Bye.
Thank you.